Welcome to my channel where OP destroys a psycho knife seller's business. Our next Reddit post is from a user. This happened many years ago in the Seattle-Tacoma area. I was a single father of 3 wonderful kids, 14, 9 and 7. They're all boys. They'd been having problems with some neighborhood bullies and they wanted to learn martial arts. I said no because they'd just be learning how to hurt people. My youngest, my sweet baby, was the smallest of them all. He was very timid and shy. He never got into fights, but he was often the victim of them. Well, one Saturday morning he came home from a visit with his grandparents, upset. His nose was bleeding and he had a fat lip. And he told me that Jason, a bully from school, had punched him and knocked him down and hit him a couple times. That was it. I was done. The kids and I went out and bought some protective gear. We went to the local sports store and bought shin guards and forearm pads and headgear. It looked like something from a Mortal Kombat movie. I also got each of them a pair of boxing gloves. That night we had a training session. Each of them took turns punching me in the gut. I'm tough. I've boxed in the military. But holy crap, those little fists pack a wallop. I told them to punch as hard as they could. And after 30 minutes, they were exhausted. I promised them we'd do this every night until they mastered the art of pain. And master it they did. One day while they were out playing, they came home and told me they'd kicked Jason's butt. He'd tried to pick a fight with them, but they were ready for him. This went on for a few months. Jason and his little gang of misfits picked on my kids, but they always lost. One day I got a call from the principal. Apparently Jason and his buddies had come to school with a couple of switchblades. They'd gotten into a fight with my kids and they had cuts on their faces. The principal said I needed to come in and apologize to Jason's parents. I said, sorry, they were defending themselves. She said, well, they shouldn't have defended themselves with their fists. I said, what do you suggest? Scissors? She said they needed to learn conflict resolution. I said, okay, what if someone pulled a knife on my son? Would you like him to use a thesaurus? She said, please come in or your kids will be suspended. I told her fine. My kids wouldn't be coming back. I yanked them out of that school immediately. Then I started looking for another school. While waiting for the dust to settle, I decided the best thing for my kids was to sign them up for some martial arts classes. They loved it. Now, this is where the story gets strange. When my kids were signed up for class, we had to fill out a waiver. I noticed that the person above my signature was Linda. I figured that was the owner. I read through the waiver and it included a clause that if our kids started a fight at school, they'd be expelled from the program. A week after signing my kids up, I got a call from the instructor. Apparently my kids had gotten into a fight at school again. The other kids had brought brass knuckles to school and my kids fought back with their boxing gloves. The instructor told me that they had violated the terms of their enrollment and they were expelled. I told him, really? Because that sounds exactly like the terms of service document that I signed. He said, yes, but that doesn't matter. You need to come in and talk to Linda. I said, fine. So I drove over there and introduced myself to Linda. She was the sweetest lady ever. We talked for a few minutes and she apologized that her policy stated that they'd be expelled. But she understood that my boys were defending themselves. I said, yep, sure. I know you understand. But I'd like to withdraw my kids from the program. And she begged me to stay. She said that they weren't expelled for fighting, they were expelled for bringing weapons to school. And she'd talk to the principal herself. I said, okay, let's talk about that. I called the principal and told her that I was informed that my kids were suspended. She said, no, they haven't been suspended. They've been expelled from the martial arts program. I said, you know what? Forget it. I'll pull them out. And hang up. Then I went back to Linda. I told her that I had spoken to the principal and we agreed that my kids were out of there. I told her that I appreciated her willingness to help out and make things right, but I'd already withdrawn them. As I walked out, I heard her say to herself, God damn it. I knew something was up. So I sat in my truck and watched the place. Within an hour, 3 different cars pulled up. 3 women, all teenagers, walked out of the building, all with bloody noses and swollen eyes. Linda came out and ushered them inside. Each time one of them came out, she'd press a wad of bills into their hands. I figured she must have made some money laundering or something. Maybe she was a mob wife. That's when I saw them. My kids came running out of the door. Linda waved and yelled for them to go get in the truck. She gave them each $50 and they peeled off. I got out of my truck and started walking toward the house. As I passed by the front window, I looked in and I saw Linda talking on the phone. She was pissed. She was yelling into the phone, cussing up a blue streak. And then she slammed the phone down and grabbed her purse. She ran to her car and sped off. I thought, well, that was weird. So I went home. My kids were pretty proud of themselves for kicking some ass. I reminded them that being strong isn't just physical, it's also mental and emotional. I suggested they find a good book to read that night. The next morning, I got a call from the school. The principal told me that my kids had been suspended. Oh, I said, that's a shame. Do you want to know why? She told me that she couldn't discuss student matters over the phone. I told her that I didn't care if she discussed it over the phone or not, but I wanted to know what happened. She said, well, 3 students claimed that your kids attacked them with brass knuckles and switchblades. I said, huh? Sounds like they finally got tired of getting beat up. She said, no, that's not why. Those students claimed that my kids threw a brick through the window of one of the kids' houses. I said, oh, now that sounds like vandalism. The principal said, yes, it is. You need to come in and discuss it. I said, why? You know, as well as I do, that my kids don't throw bricks through windows. The principal said, well, I'm not saying they did it, but vandalism is a serious offense and we need to investigate. I said, fine. I went in and spoke with the principal and the vice principal. They showed me the broken window and the 3 kids who claimed that my kids broke it. They were identical, except for the fact that they had different injuries. All 3 of them had fat lips, but one had a split eyebrow and the other had a black eye. And none of them had any signs of knuckles or blades. I laughed and said, this is the 3rd time you've told this story. Why isn't it consistent? They all looked at each other and the ringleader said, we don't know. I said, do you know what happens when you lie 3 times? The kids started crying and they said they were sorry. I asked them again what happened and they told me the truth. They said that they had challenged my kids to a fight. But my kids wouldn't fight them unless they brought brass knuckles or switchblades. They had brought those things, but only to show them. They hadn't used them. So I asked them if they'd mind if I searched their backpacks. They said, sure, whatever. So I found the brass knuckles and the switchblades. And then I walked back into the office. I said, they aren't my kids. They may have defended themselves, but they never attacked anyone. Now, could you please tell me what you intend to do with these weapons? The vice principal grabbed the weapons and said, we're going to confiscate these and we'll decide what to do with them later. I said, no, that's not how it works. These are illegal weapons and you should contact the police. If they brought these to school to attack my kids, then they should be arrested. And that's exactly what the police did. All 3 of them were arrested and charged with possession of a prohibited weapon. 2 of them were sent to juvenile detention centers. The ringleader had priors and was sent to a higher security facility. The broken window was paid for by the parents. No one was suspended, including my kids. In fact, my kids were commended for showing restraint when confronted with deadly weapons. And that's exactly what happened. Down in the comments, we have this story from this user. A couple of years ago, a story like this happened in my hometown. Turned out that the news picked it up and reported it on a statewide scale. The 3 victims refused to fight back, citing their religious beliefs against violence. The aggressors were shocked and confused and didn't know what to do, so they ran home crying to their parents. Their parents apparently beat the shit out of them and forced them to return to the school to apologize. When they arrived, they realized that the 3 kids they had attacked had gone straight to the principal instead of taking the apology. The parents were furious and demanded that the kids be punished. The principal responded by telling them that if their kids ever brought weapons to school again, they would be expelled and the cops would be called. And that's when the magic happened. One parent accused the kids of lying. Another blamed the school for not teaching their kid to stand up for himself. And the last one just stood there with his mouth hanging open. After that, the 3 attackers were homeschooled, probably so that they wouldn't get their hands on any more weapons. Yeah, malicious compliance at its finest.